All right, so for today, I wanted to talk to you about ancestral DNA activation, how a painful spiritual experience can guide you through trauma, and this will strengthen your connection with the ancestors, ultimately resulting in spiritual protection. Spirituality, in its many forms, often involves an awakening process triggered by hardship, suffering, and even supernatural confrontations. Across cultures and traditions, individuals who experience intense spiritual distress, such as sleep paralysis, entity attacks, or dark night of the soul experiences, often emerge with a heightened awareness and a deeper connection to their ancestral heritage and lineage. This phenomenon, sometimes described as ancestral DNA activation, suggests that traumatic spiritual encounters can serve as catalysts for unlocking latent ancestral gifts, along with fortifying your personal protection and deepening one's connection to the divine and through their ancestral guidance. Painful, inexplicable events such as sleep paralysis and any attacks, they can feel very terrifying, but they can also be signs of a greater spiritual initiation. This is an urgent call to reconnect with the wisdom, strength, and the protective forces of one's own bloodline. By understanding how these experiences serve as turning points for spiritual growth, we can explore how trauma rewires the subconscious mind, activating dormant abilities and urging individuals to call upon ancestral energies for guidance and ultimately protection. This video will go into the role of spiritual trauma in ancestral DNA activation, analyzing how such experiences push individuals to unlock hidden gifts, fortify spiritual defenses, and reclaim one's spiritual birthright through the guidance of ancestral spirits. So, let's talk about understanding spiritual trauma and how sleep paralysis and entity attacks play into this. The sleep paralysis can become a gateway to spiritual awareness. Sleep paralysis is often described as a terrifying state in which an individual finds themselves awake but unable to move, often sensing a dark, malevolent presence in the room. Many cultures interpret this experience through a spiritual lens. For example, in Haitian voodoo, it is believed that malevolent spirits or ancestors seeking communication may manifest during sleep paralysis. Similarly, African, Native American, and Asian spiritual traditions regard these experiences as moments when the veil between the dimensions is thinnest, which kind of almost reminds me of Halloween. From a scientific standpoint, sleep paralysis is attributed to disruptions in REM sleep cycles. However, the overwhelming consistency in reports of shadow figures, oppressive energy, and inexplicable fear suggests that this experience is not merely neurological. People may want to give you the scientific explanation for it, but it can also be an opening to the spiritual realm. You might have people trying to open up certain type of dark portals. So when you have these sleep paralysis episodes, the person will then later discover their intuitive, their psychic, and their mediumship abilities, implying that these terrifying encounters are a sign of spiritual awakening and a jumpstart to catalyzation. So let's talk about the entity attacks. The entity attacks, also known as spiritual oppression or demonic attacks, occur when individuals feel an overwhelming negative presence, attempting to drain their energy or inflict harm. Symptoms might include waking up with unexplained scratches, nightmares, hearing whispers, feeling watched, or experiencing extreme fear without explanation. For me, for example, it might be very well that I feel like someone is trying to strangle me, and trying to cut off the air supply. And then, my heart will start to race, and, you'll have these anxiety induced manifestations. And spiritual traditions worldwide recognize these as a form of spiritual warfare. Shamans, mystics, healers often describe these attacks as battles between lower vibrational energies and individuals undergoing a spiritual shift and ascension. Those untapped spiritual potential, particularly those with ancestral ties that are very strong, are likely to become targets of such attacks. And so the trauma, therefore, becomes that catalyst for a deep ancestral awakening. And let's talk about how that factors into the role of DNA in spiritual heritage. In recent years, science has confirmed that trauma can be passed down through generations via epigenetics, affecting how genes express themselves. If genetic trauma can manifest in psychological patterns, then spiritual trauma, such as recurring supernatural attacks, may also serve to activate ancestral codes hidden within the DNA. Ancestral DNA carries not only physical traits, but also spiritual gifts and protections inherited from previous generations. Many indigenous cultures believe that through suffering, one can awaken dormant abilities that have been locked away due to some kind of disconnection with one's ancestral traditions. Obviously, in peacetime, this becomes something that we may tend to overlook, ignore, but during spiritual battles in wartime, at this point, these spiritual attacks serve as an initiation rite, forcing individuals to reclaim their power and their ultimate spiritual inheritance. So let's talk about forced initiation when trauma unlocks the hidden power. Many spiritual traditions believe that true power is not given but earned through suffering and endurance. In African spirituality, which is not a monolith, those destined to become healers, diviners, or warriors often endure extreme spiritual trials before stepping into their power. For example, among the Zulu people, those chosen as Sangomas, who are spiritual healers, undergo intense initiatory experiences, including spiritual attacks and encounters with ancestors in dreams or trance-like states. Similarly, in Haitian Vodou, the individuals who are marked for spiritual greatness often experience distressing encounters with spirits before formally undergoing initiation. The trauma of sleep paralysis and entity attacks may indeed be interpreted as a modern equivalent of these ancient rites, pushing individuals towards embracing their spiritual gifts and unlocking their power and becoming aware and awakened. So let's talk about reclaiming ancestral power through spiritual warfare, and we're calling upon the ancestral spirits during this time for protection. One of the most profound lessons learned through spiritual trauma is the necessity of calling upon ancestral guidance. When individuals face persistent supernatural attacks, they often turn to their ancestors, either instinctively or as a last resort for protection, so to speak. Practices such as ancestral veneration, offering rituals, dream communication serve as bridges to reconnect with ancestral spirits. In African and indigenous traditions, ancestors serve as protectors, intervening against malevolent forces when properly honored and acknowledged. Those who regularly experience sleep paralysis or spiritual attacks may find relief through deepening their relationship with their ancestors. So, what are some ways to strengthen your connection to the ancestors, which can then bring you greater luck and protection? Well, first you have ancestral altars. Creating a space to honor deceased relatives with candles, offerings, and prayers can strengthen one's spiritual defense. We also have dream work. Paying attention to dreams and keeping a journal can help individuals recognize messages and warnings from the ancestors. We also have protective rituals like burning sage and Palo Santo and using protective sigils, which can help cleanse the negative energy and fortify the spiritual body. Also, cleansing with water. Water is a very strong method of cleansing, and so it should always be used. Invocation prayers. Reconnecting through your ancestors with spiritual words, spiritual protection, activating your dormant abilities is a very good idea. You also have spiritual discernment and the awakening of your psychic abilities. And one common after effect of repeated spiritual trauma is the heightened intuition. Many people who endure entity attacks report an increased ability to sense energy, foresee danger, or detect malevolent presences. This newfound spiritual discernment is a byproduct of ancestral activation, as traumatic experiences force individuals to trust their instincts and recognize the hidden as well as unseen forces at play. With ancestral support, individuals become more adept at differentiating between benevolent and malevolent energies. They also learn how to manipulate spiritual forces to protect themselves and others, mirroring the abilities of their ancestors who once wielded such knowledge. Now let's talk about transformation through trauma, turning from a victim to a mighty spiritual warrior. The journey from spiritual victimhood to empowerment mirrors the archetypal hero's journey. One must first endure suffering before emerging stronger and wiser. Those who undergo sleep paralysis and the attacks without succumbing to fear often come out with a renewed sense of purpose, spiritual resilience, and an unshakable connection to their lineage. Rather than viewing these experiences as punishments or curses, they can be seen as a form of spiritual training, an initiation process that forces individuals to reclaim their divine power. Through this trial by fire, individuals may rise from the darkness, out of spiritual attacks, and they can embrace their ancestral guidance that was there all along, waiting for them to unlock. And they undergo this transformation from being a passive recipient of supernatural harm to an active defender of their own spiritual sovereignty. In conclusion, trauma, whether physical, emotional, or spiritual, is a powerful force that reshapes the soul. Sleep paralysis and envy attacks, though terrifying, may serve a higher purpose in awakening dormant spiritual DNA and pushing individuals towards reclaiming their spiritual inheritance. These experiences force individuals to build resilience, seek ancestral protection and guidance, and to step into their role as spiritual warriors. Through ancestral veneration, ritual practices, and intuitive development, individuals who endure spiritual trauma can transform fear into power, darkness into wisdom, and suffering into strength. In so doing, they not only protect themselves, but also honor the legacy of those who came before them, ensuring that their ancestral lineage continues to thrive across the many generations. It's a sort of testament to your toughness that you know you came from ancestors that were not here to play. So the road to spiritual empowerment is paved with suffering, but those who endure it emerge stronger, wiser, and more in tune with the divine forces that guide and protect them. This will bring you very close to the Most High God in such a way that you will truly have that angelic and divine protection behind you, but it also brings you closer to your ancestors because they have a great love and care for you, and they will not allow you to be defeated so easily. In fact, they will fight for you tooth and nail. And so you just need to turn to them when you feel like you're in trouble.